Welcome to episode 3 of AI for Dummies and our first episode with a guest, the esteemed Mark Mays. Suman and I are longtime friends with Mark's son, Ryan, and have been lucky to know Mark for over a decade. He's the former CEO of Clear Channel, which, in addition to owning a ton of radio stations, created and spun out Live Nation, operated outdoor ads, billboards around the world, and a bunch of other cool stuff. We talk about the future of the music industry, AI voice cloning, Grimes and her offer to split royalties with people who use her voice in AI songs. And we talk about why artists can't get paid on Spotify. At the end, we actually clone Mark's voice. So stay tuned to see how easy it is to clone somebody else's voice using AI. And here's AI Mark introducing the episode to start.
Hey, it's Mark Mays. I had a lot of fun recording this episode of I for Dummies with Will and Suman. Stay tuned to hear how the music industry might change and also how my voice got cloned.
All right, let's get to it.
When Suman's talking, Will's going to go on mute, and when Will's talking, Suman's going to go on mute. Can you do that?
We can. Are you getting dual feedback? Headphones. Hang on. You got to get the audio. It's still coming out of the computer.
Okay. Yeah. How about now?
I think we're just sitting too close together. All right. Thank you for your patience.
I mean, I think this is perfect. That sounds good. Now I can hear everybody.
Okay. So let's hop into it. We have here our esteemed guest, Mark Mays, who we got to know personally in college, which was super fun, as well as professionally. You've had I think what's a really relevant career for what we're going to discuss. So AI for Dummies, we're talking about how AI affects a bunch of industries. You have a deep career in kind of media, entertainment, working at Clear Channel and having spent time at Live Nation. So excited to have you, but with that, maybe we'll do a quick intro for you, Mark.
Yeah, not to underhype, okay. But not just working at Clear Channel, but really grew Clear Channel into the national power it was, and was CEO of Clear Channel and sold Clear Channel. So would love just a quick story of how you got into that, and we don't need to linger on it too long, but kind of your professional background and how you got to Clear Channel.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the 3-minute history of Mark. How's that?
That sounds good.
Yes.
Does that start? Because it actually started at Vanderbilt, where I met my bride, Patty, who you guys know is the better half of our relationship, and you guys know her well. And so her and I met. I'll tell you the story. I was little sister chairman. Here's a little history. I was a little sister chairman at the fraternity and recruiting. I was recruiting little sisters to come, and what we would do is we'd recruit all the really cute freshman girls to come and be little sisters, and then all of the guys would then follow all the little girls, the very good, attractive girls. So I'd recruited all these girls. I was a sophomore, and I had recruited them, and so I was putting them together. And I said, I'm going to have you all have big brothers so that you get to know more people and everything in the fraternity. Put down 3 people that you do not want to date. Right? These are people that you do not want to date, and I'm going to match you. And so you have this very kind of fun relationship with an additional person within the fraternity. And Patty, I got Patty's. The first thing I did is I looked up because I was immediately attracted to her. I pulled up, and the first person that she wanted as her big brother that she did not want to date, Mark Mays.
Wait, I've never heard this story. That's epic.
I took that as kind of a challenge.
Yeah.
And we ended up dating through my collegiate career. Came out of Vanderbilt, went and did investment banking for a couple of years in Dallas for a regional bank called Epler, Guerin and Turner, which back in those days was smaller, kind of, and they had the kind of the Texas and Southwest base, and I was the only analyst for a team of about 7 or 8 professionals. So I did everything from M&A to IPOs to private placements, financings, a whole bunch of stuff that I was did all of the grunt work for. And then went to Columbia Business School. Worked for Cap Cities ABC while I was there. My dad had started this company called Clear Channel, and He lost his CFO right as I was graduating and said, hey, listen, why don't you come back and work with me? And offered me, what I thought it was about half of all the offers I had in New York City at the investment banking firms. But he kept saying, oh, but I'm going to give you these stock options. and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to go give it a try. Patty and I were just getting married. We decided we'd go back to San Antonio and give it a try. And so when I joined Clear Channel, he had probably about 12 to 14 radio stations, $20 million in revenue, $1 million in EBITDA, and was just starting to grow it. And and the old saying, if you'd rather be lucky than good, the confluence of events that then came out in the 90s with regard to deregulation and being there at the right time with kind of a high energy level, and Dad thinking, okay, now I've got somebody that's excited about the next 20 years. And so the deregulation started in the early 90s.
Can you touch on that
Dad
really
was a big
quick?
part of that. He spent a lot of time.
What exactly was the rule change? Like what happened in deregulation?
So the rule changes, right? So it was multiple rule changes. So it was multiple. So when I joined, you could only own one AM and one FM in each market. No, that was before, and then they had changed it to 2 AMs and 2 FMs that you could own in each market. And then they said, well, at that point you can only own 7 AMs and 7 FMs. They changed that to 12 FMs and 12 AMs. And then that progressively got up to where you could go in the early 90s. It was 20 AMs and 20 FMs. And then in 1996, they said you could own up to 7 or 8 AMs and FMs in any market, depending upon its size. And you could own unlimited in the U.S. So the cap came off dramatically in my first 7 years that I was at the company. And so, as you can imagine, with a cap, a regulatory cap, when that came off, the industry started consolidating rapidly. We had access to capital. We were, a public company at that point in time. Nobody really followed radio. One of my first jobs was, I remember just walking along Wall Street in 1989 and trying to relate to people exactly how radio worked. Mm-hmm. It was, hey, listen, we sell advertising. It's the triangles. I said, we have to go get an audience, and then we have to sell that to an advertiser, and we have to keep all three of us happy. And so it was people really didn't understand it as much back then. Yeah. So, spending a lot of time educating them. And then, so then through the 90s, and then we got into, after that, we kept consolidating and buying radio stations to where we, ended up with 1,200 radio stations. And along the way, we were buying television stations. We bought a lot of independent TV stations, which we flipped to Fox affiliates. We started buying billboards at what we call outdoor throughout the U.S., and that was a footprint that we actually took internationally. We ended up being in 60 countries in the billboard and outdoor business. And then
were y'all in Southeast Asia with that? I feel like I have a memory of landing in like Cambodia and seeing a Clear Channel billboard and thinking, thinking of you guys. Like,
I think one of you guys, sent me I think it was actually South America, and you were in a remote part, and you texted me a picture of a Clear Channel, but it may have been Chile or one of these places, and you texted me a billboard going, oh my God, you guys are everywhere.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so we were Southeast Asia. We were in China, had a big business in China. So we were all through. We were in 60 different countries in that billboard business. And then we also got in the live entertainment business, where we started buying amphitheaters and concert promoters and whatnot and rolling that up. We eventually spun that out. That became Live Nation. So Live Nation is the old Clear Channel Entertainment. They bought Ticketmaster. That's when it actually really started working well for them.
Yeah, that's cool.
By the way, I want to back up a bit. I want to talk about just like personal stories for a second. So We met you at Vanderbilt, freshman year of Vanderbilt. Your son was one of our fraternity brothers and good friends, and so we have a few stories from you, kind of personally. One of which, you're a Rolling Stones fan, correct?
I'm a Rolling Stones and Grateful Dead fan.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember the Rippy story of us. This was, I think, senior year. I don't know if this is kosher to speak about on a public channel here, but
Rippy's is the most important bar in
I
Nashville.
have nothing to
by
hide,
the way.
Sam. I'm not a public entity. I am not the CEO of a public company anymore. I have nothing to hide.
So the story is, we loved Mark, and so he was always a part of our kind of college experience. We went to the CMAs with you. My first time skiing, I think Will's first time skiing was in Jackson Hole.
Mark generously paid. There were 4 or 5 of us had never skied before and got us a half-day lesson, and we slid down the slopes. And I ended up spending a winter in Sun Valley. So know that your investment paid off.
Yeah, Chris
Paid
is
off.
out.
You got off of your bum and onto the skis in
Exactly.
no time.
Yeah. I remember Chris, our friend, broke his arm within the first 10 minutes of skiing in Jackson Hole. And now
Yes, I remember me and Kanako had to, yeah.
Good
I had to
times.
entertain Kanako, right? For like 7 days I had to entertain Chris, which was,
Yeah, he
I was
he
planning on
usually
working, and then I he had different ideas.
One of my favorite stories from you, though, is you love the Rolling Stones and the Grateful Dead. I remember once I was super excited. I had a Rolling Stones needlepoint belt, and we go to this bar, Rippy's. It was towards the end of senior year. We had been drinking a bit, and I remember it was my worst negotiation ever, because you go, I like this belt a lot, and I think you offered me $100, and I think I negotiated you down to 37 cents and gave you the belt. And the next morning, I'm at brunch with you.
That is correct. That is correct. It'll go down in the history of the worst negotiation of all
Probably
times
of all
in
time.
anybody's negotiating career.
I completely disagree. I think it was the best negotiation of my life, because here we are sitting here doing this podcast. We have a lifelong relationship. We've
And
kept
your
in
pants are
touch.
falling down.
And my pants are falling down.
don't even have a belt.
And I could have always bought it. In fact, I did get the belt back the next day. I was like, "Where the heck is my belt?" I'm sitting there with your son, and he goes, my dad bought the belt, and then you actually gave it back to me. So you parted with that belt. But I would say the reason I bring these stories up is, I remember my dad coming for Father's Day. He always talked about how we talked about your professional accomplishments, how just genuine and a nice guy you were all throughout kind of our college, and truly kind of this like mentor, friend, father kind of figure, and certainly learned a lot, as you mentioned before this started, on just how to be in society as we transition from college to kind of our professional worlds. So wanted to tell a couple funny stories and thank you for investing in us as kind of young college kids.
It's been a wonderful experience for sure. Joyful for me as well.
Cool. As you think about or think back on that journey at Clear Channel, and this will parlay into then where things are going, but what were some of the big changes you saw in the radio and music industry over those 2 decades or 2 decades plus?
Well, I mean, everything's, I think there was a couple of things. I think there's, you think about the changing tides, right? So there was the regulatory environment changed on top, right? Which allowed aggregation and other things with regard to governance and corporate structures and stuff like that. But underlying, you had the technological changes, right? So you had all of the different aspects with regard to, I remember when I got in, when I was 14 or whatnot, and I was working in a radio station, and we'd have these big wheels of tape, and I'd be cutting up tapes into smaller little carts where people could record commercials and stuff like that. So it was, it's just a different technology versus, all of a sudden, audio you could listen to on the computer, and you could create studios, you could create a whole different listening experience that ended up, in my career all the way online with streaming. So you have this great ability of what they call broadcast, which was one point to a broad audience to almost a individual cast to individual people that could customize exactly what they wanted and how they wanted it. So it was a technologically a override underneath that, and then once the regulatory thing changed, and then the technology continues to change, right, even today. And so that is that's the challenge, for the next 10 20 years, is how do you use that technology to continue to develop additional revenue streams and whatnot.
Did artists used to just get paid better from radio? Have you seen the Snoop Dogg clip from the interview where he's talking about Spotify, and it's like, my friends.
Why don't you pull that up?
It's exciting, but streaming got to get their shit together. Because I don't understand how the fuck you get paid off of that shit. Like, can somebody explain to me how you can get 1 billion streams and not get $1 million? Like, that shit don't make sense to me. Like, I don't know who the fuck running the streaming industry, if you in here or not. But nigga, you need to give us some information on how the fuck to track this money down. Because 1 + 1 ain't adding up to 2. That shit don't add up, and I have to say it. Because that's the main gripe with a lot of us artists, is that we do major numbers with streams and this shit, but it don't add up to the money. Like, what the fuck is the money? When I first came out, my records would sell based off of physical. If you sold 1 million copies, that means if $9.99, $9 million, you get this percentage, that's what it is. So if I sell how many streams, how much money do I get? It's not being translated, and it's not working for the artist right now. And I just want to speak to that in the music industry. Like, that's fucked up. And we need to find a way to figure that out the same way the writers are figuring out. The writers are striking because streaming, they can't get paid. Because when it's on the platform, it's not like in the box office. In the box office, if it does all these numbers, you may get an up. Oh, it did this many, here's another check. But on streaming, you got 300,000 hours that somebody watched your movie. Where's the money? And I know I'm going off a script right now, but fuck it. This is business. This is business. You know what I'm saying? This is a room full of business people, and somebody may hear this and be able to do something about it, so that way the next artist don't have to struggle or cry or try to figure out how to get to his money. Because some of these artists are streaming millions and millions and millions and millions of fucking streams, and they don't got no millions of dollars in their pocket. So I just wanted to say that.
Talk that talk.
I'm sorry. So there's always been payola and whatnot that you were not, you could not pay artists. And it goes back to the 60s and 70s. You pay with the royalties to the underlying musicians and whatnot through companies like ASCAP and BMI that actually, so you're paying if you write a song, if you perform and stuff like that, but the actual artist, they usually historically always got paid from the record companies and the sales of records. You were not allowed to pay the artist directly, and that was a federal law. Excuse me. So in the streaming world, that's changed, where Spotify and Apple Music and those guys, as you stream, you can pay the artist. In fact, you're required to pay the artist, and that's a different economic model than the broadcast.
Well, I guess that's
model.
because the
so
streaming is comped against buying a CD.
Right. Exactly.
So if you were an artist, you would get on the radio. One of the reasons was so people would find out about you and then go to the store and buy your CD or buy your record or something like that, right? And that would get money in your
right. It was the highest correlation between record sales was how much airplay was played on the radio stations. And so what the federal government wanted to prevent was us getting paid to play the records, right? So there was no way that they didn't want us to pay to influence the albums and whatnot that we were playing. So that was the theory.
Would it also be illegal for artists to come to you and pay you, or was that fair game? Like, people could pay to promote?
No. Artists could not pay us, and we could not pay
It was
artists.
both ways. That's cool. I remember, I bring it up because I'm curious what you think, if there's a economic model that works online. I remember one of my favorite projects, what kicked me down the entrepreneurship path, was RageChill. My first app I ever made in college, where you slid a bar from rage to chill. I don't know if you remember this, and it played songs. and it blew up on Reddit. And I was
Let's not underplay RageChill, by the way.
Yeah,
It was
I
an
mean,
epic app during our college
sick.
career.
And I was actually interning at the FCC, which I've talked to you about, and there's funny stories about like the 8th floor at the FCC and the old commissioner. But I was interning there the summer RageChill blew up, and I remember we were on the front page of Reddit, and we were illegally streaming songs from an Amazon S3 bucket, and I panicked and left. We were like, I always tell the story, we were the floor above the enforcement floor, which is just made up. Like I don't think they had an enforcement floor at the FCC headquarters, but I ran back to my dorm and like pull up my servers, and we're streaming millions of songs. And you were gracious enough to talk to me, and your point was like Pandora still loses money, and this is like the success, the model, and they can't figure it out. Like, how do you generate enough ad revenue to cover the rights you have to pay? And I'm curious, has anything changed there? Or like you see Snoop Dogg complaining about artists can't get paid off 1 billion streams on Spotify, but Spotify's not really making money either. It seems. So
they're not, and I think that they tried to. I think the subscription model works, right? I think that has always worked, but you don't have all of your listeners that are and users that are subscription payers. So the subscription model works. The ad model, what they found out is what they tried to do is they tried to go to all these podcasts, right, and create content and talent where they could get a leveraged model. They had a fixed cost, and if they could get enough listeners, then they could make it work. But I think they didn't get enough listeners, so they're kind of retrenching on some of that. I think Spotify, I think they actually now are free cash flow positive.
They are.
I think they are. I think it's because of the subscription revenue. But I think they have, they pay an enormous amount of their revenue out to artists. And of course the artists are never, it's never enough for the artists.
I think I've read now that you say that they've like a set percentage of their revenue goes to artists. So they're not on the hook for a per stream fee. It's like whatever percentage of listen time you as an artist earned, you get that percentage from the bucket of royalties, I think. I don't know if that's right.
I think that is directionally
correct. I think that's the theory. I think people argue with exactly the mathematics behind it, but I think yes, that's the theory.
This is my perspective on it. I think there is a consumer kind of surplus. Basically, it's all in favor of the consumer. Because for my demographic, almost everyone I know is a Spotify subscriber.
Sure.
Even my parents are Spotify subscribers. But I go home to my parents' house, and my dad's got hundreds of records, right? He has vinyl records, and I remember getting my first CD as a kid, NSYNC, I think was a CD. And you would pay, even then, right? You're paying $10-20 for 10 songs, right? And I would listen to music, ever so often. Now I consume content on Spotify, whether it's podcasts, songs, constantly throughout the day, constantly, right? And I pay, I don't know what I pay, maybe $10 or $15 a month. By the way, I'm super price insensitive. I would pay more given the value they give to me. So even though basically I think consumers are getting a lot of listening and they're listening to tons of artists, that's all being split amongst this big group of artists for all these listening minutes. And Spotify's not making a ton of money from it, and then neither are the artists. Which brings me to my next point, which is a lot of artists are making money. Actually, my impression is on live events. So you have Taylor Swift recently. I think she's making however $100 millions on her massively produced show, which obviously you're familiar with from Live Nation. So I think I don't know what your perspective is, Mark, on kind of like how you then monetize instead of maybe from like listening online or whatever it is, from then taking that and getting people to come see you in person.
They should sell belts for 37 cents. It's a huge moneymaker.
Well, so the old model was, right, is you went on tour to sell records, right? And you didn't make any money touring. And then when they started not making any money on the records, they're like, hey, we better start making some money on the touring. And the ability to increase pricing on the tickets enabled them to, the artists are like, hey, forget it. We're going to increase pricing. It used to be that they didn't want to, they wanted their fans to have, everybody have equal access. And now they're like, hey, listen, we got to monetize our ability to show up. And so that was a big difference. And yeah, the artists make a ton more money touring now today, but it's probably been the case for the last 10 years, maybe 15 years. So they're making more and more of their revenue pie out of touring for sure.
Well, I'm curious. Let's start at the dummy part as we transition to the AI talk. What's been your exposure? Have you played with?
I'm the dummy part.
We
I'm the dummy part. You guys are the AI.
I don't know.
we
CEO
are
of a
all
public company. CEO of a public company. I don't know about dummy, but
I think we're all dummies in the face of what is happening here. So, have you played with ChatGPT or any other tools? What's been your exposure to this stuff? You mentioned before the call that you're a Lotus 123 guy. So,
yes, it's hard for me to change. So I have played with GPT just in the last couple of months. I remember after Daniel's wedding, who is child number 3, as you guys know.
Gosh, Daniel got married.
I was like, well, I just want to see.
Wow.
I want to see how they're. Maybe I should have gone online and I did rehearsal. Dad's rehearsal dinner toast. Create one for me. And this was after the wedding, and I was like, I just want to see if it's going to be as good as mine. And boom, it comes up, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Wish I had done that before. There's little nuggets in there I could have used.
Yeah.
So,
well, you didn't have it for Ryan's
like
wedding, and that went pretty well. So.
Yeah, I did not, and that was. I wish I would have, because it maybe would have concised it instead of the 30 minutes or however long that toast was with the golf ball.
Yeah,
that was a long one.
Yeah, and pouring Coronas in the bucket as well. I remember it. It was good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's always room in life for more beer.
So
that was the takeaway. That
was the takeaway, but sometimes not. Sometimes there isn't. Except for sometimes. Have you seen these AI clones and like these Biggie Small raps and any of these audio clips?
So I went, you sent me that, and I have not really heard a lot of them. And, I went to the site just to click and hear one. And, but it was a rap song, so I can only last about 20 seconds.
Well, I think that's hilarious.
It was, I couldn't tell the difference. So I'm sure that becomes a big, sticking point from an artistics, right? It was all about, whether it's books or photography as it goes online, and how do you trademark and the ability to have all these great paintings and stuff like that. So I think there is clearly going to be, a opportunity on how you protect intellectual property as you move forward through the AI.
Well, let's hit him, Mark Bear, with the rap song for 20
well, we
seconds.
Can play it on. We'll just insert it right here.
Got my heart on my sleeve with a knife in my back. What's with that? Ay, 21, I love him, they're my brother. That's my stat. Ay, Metro made the beat, so you know that it's gon' slap. Ay, yeah, it's gon' slap. Ay, time, run it back. Talking to a diva, yeah, she on my nerves. She think that I need her, kick her to the curb.
On my track, like Selena, baby, on my cheetah, baby, yeah. She thinking a Lambo for a drive, it's in my Aventador, and she way out the store.
There's some cool ones. This is also rap. I love the Drake and The Weeknd one. That's my favorite one so far.
Yeah,
but the immediate.
I don't know if I listened to that one.
Just from like a music taste perspective, like, do you think it'd be cool to hear? I've seen some that are John Lennon covering modern songs, like a Coldplay song. Would you envision yourself if there was a Spotify playlist of like John Lennon covering all these songs, and it's this AI generated voice? Is that just weird to you,
the Rolling
or
Stones?
Something sacred about that rubs you the wrong way? Yeah, or the Rolling Stones.
So I think that's a very personal, right? So I'm not saying from a legalistic perspective. From a very personal consumer perspective, I think, music is all about listening to things you like. And so me, I love, John Lennon, and if he was covering different stuff, I'm sure I would enjoy it, and I'd probably listen to it. So whether it would make one of my playlists, I don't know.
Wait, do you use Spotify to make playlists? Actually, on a slight aside.
Oh, I'm just so disappointed you're not following me on my Spotify playlist.
We will follow you right now. Count us 2 more Spotify subs. There's some generational behavior here. I think that I don't know about you, but the younger and younger people I meet, they're curating less playlists, I feel like, because you get the Spotify Discover Weekly, which is an AI generated, based on your taste and machine learning. Here's what you're going to like this week. And people just don't make their own lists anymore, I feel like.
Well, I would say the old school thing was, I'm sure you did this, Mark. I'm sure I don't know if you did this, Will, was you make, you like a girl or a guy, you like someone, you give them, you burn a CD and you make them your favorite songs and you pass along to them. That was kind of like this. And then you wrote the names of the song, like 1 through, I don't know if you ever did this.
Is that how you got Patty out of the person I definitely wouldn't date list?
Well, how it used to be when I was in college is you would make party tapes, right? So you spend an afternoon and you'd have all your vinyls and you'd have a party tape, and you would, I have party tape 1 to party tape 23, I think. And we would make afternoon party. We'd spend the afternoon, making 45 minutes on one side, you flip it, and 45 minutes on the other side. And everybody'd get to pick a song, and you record it, and it became part of the thing. And then you would play those during parties. You think about your day, right? You just plug a phone into a speaker. We had sound, massive speakers and sound systems and amplifiers and, all of that. So it's just evolved to now you can do it very easily.
We had the aux cord war. That was our generational challenge of someone didn't like the song, they'd go rip out the phone. And that's why that was the genesis of RageChill. It's like, you're just choosing the mood. We're either rage or we're chill right now, and don't rip out that aux cord.
Right. Yours was aux cord. Ours was the key to the stereo closet. Right. So if you didn't have a key to the stereo closet, you can screw it. Right. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we were super excited to have you on is basically what happened was, and there's a lot still happening, was Drake and Weeknd. Some anonymous person had created a song in the likeness, the vocal likeness, the voice of Drake and Weeknd. And it sounded pretty damn good. And it got super famous. It was streaming on Spotify. They ended up taking it off because it was completely, they didn't know what was going to happen in terms of if the labels were going to sue, what was Drake going to do, and so forth. And so they took it off. And then Grimes, who, I don't know if you're familiar, used to date Elon Musk, musician. She is progressive. So she essentially offered 50% royalties to anyone who makes a song with her voice. And she actually ended up making an application, I think, that makes it easier for people to basically use her voice to go make songs. So then there's a couple of angles here. One is if you're a famous artist, so Lennon or whomever, right? Elton John. Let's take Elton John. Say he's like, hey, I'm iconic, right? People love my voice. They know it. I want to go have another revenue stream, and you can go use my voice for whatever it is. That's a potential new revenue stream, right? But then also if you don't have the appropriate revenue share, then it gets super murky. So I just thought it was interesting. You've seen a few evolutions of this, Mark. So how do you think it shapes out?
Well, I don't know how it shapes. I think that there'll be all sorts of different. I think people are going to try all sorts of different models, right? And they're going to try and they're going to see, what are the different things that stick. And what is it that consumers will actually listen to? Can you create additional revenue streams? And what revenue streams are they actually utilizing that are not taking away from their existing revenue streams? So are they incremental revenue streams, or are they robbing the existing revenue streams? So there'll be all sorts of playing with those different things. And you're right, there'll be people that are coming out and just using it for promotional purposes of, hey, I just want to get my name out there, because any publicity is good publicity. And so there'll be all those different iterations around it. And just like streaming and whatnot, I don't think people are going to figure it out in the first few years, right? It's going to be 3, 4, 5 years before they figure out exactly what consumers are willing to pay for, how they're going to pay for it, and whatnot, and there'll be all sorts of people that are rushing through it, knowing that they're not necessarily going to make money, but they're trying to prove out different models that could potentially work.
My mind went to, when I saw some of this tech, to one of the Clear Channel models, I think, and correct me if this is wrong, is like, okay, you have stations in a bunch of different markets. You can now go and do a deal with Ryan Seacrest and nationally syndicate. And everyone likes him. It's sort of a precursor to YouTube stars or whatever. Like, everyone's kind of watching the same creator from every market. And so my mind went to, there's something similar in that to me where, okay, if there's a certain voice that everyone wants to hear, could you have AI draft, here's the weather in every market, and have this recreated voice read through, and that's the morning report as you drive into work via the radio. But is that even a cost center? You know, like, is it a big deal? Like, where's the value in that actually?
Let me jump in. So do you know the Vin Diesel for the movie Guardians of the Galaxy got paid like tens of millions of dollars to be the voice of Groot? And there's a hilarious video of him just saying Groot in like 10 or 100. He apparently said it thousands of times, different inflections. By the way, you don't have to do that anymore. And you could just like so to answer your question, yes, I think in animated movies and that sort of thing, they do actually bring in famous people to do these voices, and they pay them a shitload of money, right? So they might, I think that I mean, there's just a general theme around like the cost of production of things going down. By the way, you used to, with an artist, now you can do a lot of things with AI, like automatically generate. You know, think about like Dr. Dre, right? He would create all these beats and produce music and that sort of thing. If you can automatically take away the things that were difficult with regards to creative production, in this case music, it totally changes the cost curve of this stuff. It makes it easier. We interviewed an illustrator yesterday, and he was like, I spent 2 decades learning how to be an illustrator, and now you can create something that makes a pretty good version very easily, right there. So I don't know. I think it changes a lot of things in terms of the cost centers.
I think that's probably right. I think I think it'll all depend upon the consumer and what they're willing to pay for and not pay for. There is intellectual property, right? If you're trying to be Vin Diesel, if you're trying to be Ryan Seacrest, if you're trying or you're saying this is Ryan Seacrest, there's protections. So you can't try to be somebody that you're not. So there are protections around that intellectual property.
Is there really? Like, if you're an impersonator, you couldn't be hired to impersonate. Forget AI for a second. If I would just had a great Vin Diesel voice, I couldn't be hired to do a Vin Diesel voice on a movie if somewhere in the contract it explicitly, I guess, mentioned like Vin Diesel.
Well, you could be, but you couldn't try to be Vin. You could use a AI generated voice, but you couldn't try to be being Vin Diesel, if that makes sense. In other words, you couldn't portray yourself as being Vin Diesel. You can just, this is my voice, right?
Well, here's another scenario. Recently, Ed Sheeran was in a lawsuit. I'm not sure if you're familiar. And basically, I think that the concept of the lawsuit was he used some riff or some guitar riff that was like similar to someone from the past. And his argument, he won, but the legal decision. But he's like, dude, musicians borrow from other musicians, whether it's a guitar, kind of any kind of chord or whatever, all the time. That's how music is created, right? Like, it's iterative. And so that's interesting. It doesn't have to be a voice, by the way. It could be a beat. It could be a progression. I don't know.
Correct. So all that is, it's all what is going to be the intellectual property of the future.
Yeah, and I wonder how, I guess if you hear a voice that sounds like Tom Cruise in a commercial, and you're Tom Cruise, and you say, that's not right, they're using my voice, but they don't claim it's Tom Cruise or something. I guess the discovery of the lawsuit at that point would have to, my guess, where the legal frontier might be is, did you train this AI on Tom Cruise's voice? Clips of him. And if so, then that's, the illegal impersonation, I think. I mean, none of us are attorneys, so I guess we're in pure speculation land. But
I don't think attorneys know this.
We're going to have to get Alan on the phone to maybe give us a full rendition.
We'll have to phone him in. Last thing we definitely wanted to get to, and this is more of a PSA. We're not going to do this live on the call, but there's this tool called play.ht for everyone aware. You can record as short as a 30-second clip of your own voice, and it will recreate it. And of course, you can go deeper and upload more and train a more realistic voice. But I've done this already for Morgan Freeman. And after the call, I'll actually do one based on one of these recordings for you, Mark, and just text it to you for you to see how creepy it is. All these scams.
I hate to hear another nasal voice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you and me both. A few years ago, my wife's grandparents called and were freaking out because someone was calling them and saying that they'd been in a car wreck and they were at a hospital and they needed money. And it didn't sound anything like my wife, but it was real enough and scary enough that they were calling to verify. And imagine if they somehow trained this voice to sound like her and did the same thing with this scam call. And this is one thing I think you should bring up with your family, that you need a safe word for scam calls, where if someone is impersonating your voice with this technology, you can, you need to say like pineapple or Rolling Stone belt or something to know that it's actually you and that it's real. Because these scams are going to get out of control.
I totally agree with that, and they definitely, as you know, they always they prey on the elderly and the people that would be fearful and maybe not quite as cognitive, that there could be things like this out there. But I think that's good, and I'd love any recommendations for family words for the Mays family. Those would be good. Rolling Stones.
We can't do that one now. I think we talked about it too much on the.
I know we have. Now we have to do. I have to do something else. But if you could text me offline any creative ones that potentially, all you got, because you guys know all six Mays kids.
Yeah.
Which one?
Well, there's definitely a Vanderbilt theme here, so maybe Branscombe.
Yeah.
Sam.
I would say, I want to end on a more general note. You've seen, I think it's pretty crazy to think about the pace of technological innovation, right? When you were a banker, I mean, you joke, right? But you were probably using a lot different technology than people now. And then we look ahead, and even in our lifetime, in your lifetime, you're going to see crazy progress. How do you feel just generally on AI? Not even, I mean, maybe how it relates to music, but just like the pace of technological innovation. Are you optimistic? Are you kind of nervous or scared? Are you kind of ambivalent? What's like the vibe?
So I am not nervous. I'm not scared. I'm not worried. I think that technology is something you have to embrace. It's something that it's coming. It's, you're never going to regulate it. Whoever was, saying that it needs to be regulated or whatnot. Yeah. I just don't know how you regulate it. Yeah, you can't regulate it. How do you regulate it? Yeah. And there's going to be those people that don't want to regulate, and they're not going to be within the U.S. And there's no way to regulate it. And so you embrace it, and I think you embrace it, and you try to be ahead of it, and you try to figure out how to utilize it. And it's gonna change. It's gonna change what people do, just as everything, if you look back what people were doing 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, there's just been an evolutionary change with regard to workplace and what people do and everything to that extent. So, it's the old adage of you got to constantly be learning new things in order to be a better person or a better workforce into the future. So I just think that that's part of what people have to do, is embrace it, and be holistic around it.
I love that. I mean, based on the wire spread and printer in your background, you're definitely embracing technology. I love it.
The wire. There's a lot of wires, but that is.
We're
hey
in the same
guys,
boat
you
here.
wouldn't have. Where's
we
that?
Got wires everywhere.
That's a snake river.
Where is that picture taken? You guys have been there. I have a great picture of you two sitting on the cliff in the snow, there, looking out over Picnic Point.
We will end the podcast with that picture. I have it starred and favorited in my phone. One of the all-time pics of us from school at y'all's spot in Jackson Hole.
That's
holding
it.
beer, looking at that beautiful scene. Yeah.
So with that, thank you so much for the time, Mark. And hopefully see you live soon. Talk to you soon.
All right, guys. St. Louis, San Antonio, or at the next wedding, we will catch up.
Absolutely.
Right, cheers.
Awesome chatting. Have an awesome day.
This is play.ht. It's one of many services where you can both use ultra realistic voices, or you can upload audio and actually clone a voice. So I'm using play.ht in a little app I created where you can call and talk to GPT-4, and it'll stream back a response and use a play.ht ultra realistic voice to read back ChatGPT, essentially, or GPT-4's response. But after our episode with Mark, I wanted to show him what his voice sounded like once uploaded. And so I took his entire audio track and I created an account here on play.ht, and you come into the dashboard and you've got a bunch of options, but I went here to voice cloning and clicked clone a voice and uploaded his audio track. So that's just the audio track that was recorded on Riverside, only him, the Mark Mays audio track. It was very long. It was about an hour's worth of audio, and I uploaded that to play.ht. It processed overnight. I went to bed. I woke up this morning, and we had a cloned voice. So I opened up the studio and recorded, or just typed in these words, these two clips, and generated previews. So we will play those for you now, and you make of it what you will in terms of how similar it is to his voice. I think it's uncanny. So here's the first sentence.
Hey, it's Mark. My favorite two people in the world are Will and Suman.
And then here's the second.
As an avid fan of rap music, I'm a believer in the Tupac Biggie conspiracy, and I'm hoping that Biggie Smalls comes out of hiding and decides to run for president.
It's the inflection and intonation that's different in these new language models. I mean, these new audio models that are replicating voices. The pausing and timing isn't perfect, but it's way better than it used to be on those robotic voices, of really paying attention to the commas, the inflection of the voice, how you end a sentence, how you timing going into the end of the sentence. It's really, really, really good. And this is what scammers are going to start using to call and claim to be somebody that they're not, and tell you that they have an emergency and to wire money, leave a voicemail in the voice of somebody whose audio they just ripped off of YouTube or Instagram or something like that. Let us know what you think.